Again? Really? We have to go over this again? How many more times? Hey, hi, how you doing? This is the Gamertron, and welcome back to the Gamertron Show. I am tired of repeating this same subject over and over again, and making videos and statements in other videos about it over and over again. However, in order to combat this misguided viewpoint, it must be stated over and over again. And videos must be made about it over and over again, talking about violence in video games, and how it's not a bad thing. Year after year, I hope that this stereotype and this myth that has been debunked several times over will finally fade away into obscurity. Something we can look back on and go, oh man, that was so silly. But no, there's always gotta be that one, or two, or few dozen that gotta regress us back to the same old arguments with the same old points, wasting everyone's time. Guess who's going after violent video games now? Is it Jack Thompson, the media, social justice warriors? No! It's snobby, entitled, self-righteous, virtue-signaling article writers, journalists. The past few months, there have been a string of articles written for a multitude of different websites denouncing the violence in video games. Of course, singing the same old song, violence in video games makes people violent. Violence in video games is disgusting. Violence in video games is offensive. Gee, where have I heard that before? I'm honestly really conflicted about this whole situation because half of me feels like this isn't worth making a video out of, but the other half of me feels like something needs to be said, even though it's already been said. Every time someone accuses video games that have mature, violent content somehow has a negative impact on its players and society. And that is simply an ill-informed and incorrect stance to have. Multiple scientific studies have been done over the course of decades since the inception of video gaming that prove time and time again violent video games do not cause people to be violent. And what is with this overall condemning of violence in general? Not only are these journalists, these article writers condemning the violence in video games once more, like everyone else before them who has tried and failed, but they're now going after movies too. Why? Now, I'm not saying you have to like violence in movies or in video games. There are just some people who cannot stand it, cannot stand violence, period, and that is completely normal, completely fine. Some people simply cannot tolerate or stomach fictional violence, as it simply reminds them too much of real-life violence. And you know what? That's perfectly fine. That's perfectly understandable. Some people just don't like violent content for their entertainment. That's perfectly fine. But to call people who watch and consume and are entertained by violent content violent themselves, or degenerate, or wrong, that's wrong. Look, just because we have different personal preferences and tastes in our entertainment doesn't mean I am somehow lesser to you and you are somehow better to me. That's simply ridiculous. Just because I enjoy violent video games like Doom, Mortal Kombat, games with excessive blood and gore, it doesn't mean I'm actually okay with actual blood and gore. I'm disgusted, I'm horrified by real-world, real-life violence. I get incredibly tense and nervous at the sight of real-life blood. As a matter of fact, studies show that most people who consume violent content for their entertainment, whether it be movies, television, or video games, are more prone and more sensitive to real-world violence. The accusations I see these accusers making is that consuming violent content, playing violent video games, makes you violent and makes you desensitized to real-world violence. Like you just don't care about inflicting harm to others or yourself. Which is just a ridiculous notion. People play video games to escape reality. Because video games, for the most part, outside of a few, are incredibly unrealistic. And the violence contained in these video games are completely unrealistic, and that's a good thing. A huge part of why people play video games, of why I play video games, is to escape from realism. It's escapism, an escape from the mortal world, where we can live out fantasies, where we can experiment and take risks that we would never take in real life in a virtual world. People who play violent video games aren't violent people. And they don't actually commit violence in the real world because a video game inspired them to do that violence, to create that violence. Video games are, for the most part, completely harmless. And I apologize for what I'm about to say right now in this video. I'm about to get very serious right now. So if this is too heavy for some people, I understand, but it's time to stop blaming inanimate objects for the actions of evil human beings. Violent people do not commit violence because of violent video games. Violent people commit acts of violence because they are violent, because they are bad people. Evil people do evil things. And you are not going to stop evil people from doing evil things by censoring and banning violent video games, violent media, violent content. I've seen this mindset come up more and more, that it's not the bad guy's fault they're a bad guy, it's these other things that made them a bad guy. I know it's hard to accept. I know it's incredibly difficult to accept. It's a horrifying thing to accept, but we have to accept that there are just evil people out there. There are evil human beings that are selfish and angry and have no empathy. They will hurt others, they will take from others, and they will not care about others because there are people that are just like that. It's not a mental disorder. It was not caused because of what media they consumed, what video games they played, or movies they watched. They were just bad people. And what these snobby journalists, these self-righteous, virtue-signaling article writers, think they can score brownie points with their peers and admiration from the public by putting on this act that they want to help out other people. If we censor and ban and alter these violent video games, it'll create less violence and make the world a better place. I'm sorry, but that is an ignorant and closed-minded way to look at the world. It's like saying, let's get rid of all the knives and all the guns and people won't stab and shoot each other anymore. What you fail to realize is, behind the knife, behind the gun, behind the violence, there is a person. There is a person committing that violence. And even if you take away the weapon or the media content that inspired that person to commit the violence, in the end, that person committed the violence as a choice. They chose to commit that violence because they are not good people. I'm sick and tired of art. Whether it be movies, novels, television, or of course video games, getting blamed for the actions of evil human beings. I see this generally from the media all the time, blaming something else but the actual creator of the violence, the actual perpetrator of the violence, the actual person behind the violence. It's always something else. It's always the fault of guns. It's always the fault of video games and movies and rock and roll music. Blame this for the violence. Blame this for the violence. God forbid we actually blame the evil piece of shit that committed the violence. We have got to stop blaming art and consumer products for the actions of evil people. Evil people do evil things. Evil people are never going to disappear, and they are never going to stop doing evil things. All we can do is punish the people who do evil things and make sure we protect ourselves from the people who plan to do these evil things. And before I end this video, I'm calling out all these journalists, all these article writers, condemning video games and movies for their violent content. How about, instead of being a virtue-signaling pussy and writing a poorly written, half-assed article on violent entertainment, how about you actually help out victims in violence? Join a support group, donate to a charity, actually do some goddamn good. Leave video game developers, movie directors, and book authors alone. I would like to apologize for the very heavy and very serious nature of this video. I know this isn't my usual content, but I feel like there were some things here that just needed to be said. Anyways, that's been a video. If you like the video in any way, shape, or form, be sure to hit the like button. And the like button helps you, helps me, helps everybody involved with the video if you hit the like button. If you want to leave a comment in the comment section below, I love reading comments. I don't get nearly enough comments. I love reading comments. Please leave a comment. If you want to help out and support the video, then please consider sharing it on social media, Twitter, and Facebook. And if you want to help out and support me directly, then there's always Patreon. Anyways, guys, that's been a video, and I'll see you all later.